What's up, guys? My name is Kayla Bundy, and you're listening to the Finding Hope podcast. I'm so happy and overjoyed you are here. And if you're listening on Spotify, there is some prompts or questions within this episode unique to this episode. So make sure you go and answer those or respond to those because I love reading them, and it's more of like a conversation between us that way. As always, happy Wednesday, and there's always a new episode on Wednesday because I don't know about you, but I can always use a little pick-me-up halfway through the week. And so whether you're listening today or on a Friday or Saturday, I hope this is helpful for you and gives you the hope and encouragement you need to get through the rest of the day. In this week's episode, I want to challenge you to confront a fundamental truth that sometimes you might be the problem. And that is why this episode is called I'm the Problem, It's Me. For all my Swiftie fans out there, you girlies know that song was such a bop, and it was such a bop because there's definitely a truth to it. Sometimes, we go, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. And it's so true, and I think this conversation is absolutely essential for personal growth because I'm such a firm believer that you cannot grow if you don't know what needs growth. And so in this episode, I'm just so excited to explore how to actually be self-aware and when to identify when it's you and not them. Growing up, loved my parents to death. And they always had their eyes out, looking out for me. They were so gracious. And I don't know about you, but my parents would always say to me when something would happen that, oh, well, they're just jealous. Oh, well, it's because of this. Oh, well, they probably feel this way. And I know that there is truth to that. I'm not saying there isn't truth to that. But I definitely grew up in a way where the people I respected most would say, she's probably doing that because she's jealous of you, or she's probably doing that because she wanted that part, or she wanted that boy. Don't get me wrong, there were definitely times my parents called me out for things that were my issue. However, I vividly remember, to this day even, I will have conversations about me, about my sisters, about whoever, and I get that same response. And I found myself being like, Mom, I know you mean the best, but I genuinely don't think she's jealous. I actually would have done the same exact thing. I understand where she's coming from and what she's probably feeling. And I don't think it's from jealousy or anger or whatever. I don't think it actually is her issue. I think she's valid in that. And that is what brings me to the point that I want to make, that yes, sometimes we experience things that are unpleasant, that are negative, where there's gossip, things are spoken about us or over us that are just mean and vicious, and the reactions we receive from somebody might be very hurtful, and it is their issue that they are projecting. However, they can do something as well where they're doing it with grace and they're expressing themselves and they're super valid in what they're doing. And because of my previous trauma, triggers, etc., I can view their response as something really hurtful and put that blame on them, where in reality, that is my issue that I need to work on. And I feel like a great example of this in relationships is we've all heard of like the guy that's super jealous, and then there's the girl. Instead of the guy coming to her and saying, you know, I'm really insecure, I know you're not doing anything wrong, and I know when you're being friendly or when you're connecting well with other people, I know I have absolutely nothing to worry about because I know you only have eyes for me, and this is my issue. I just would appreciate if we could work on this, and that way you know where I'm coming from, and I understand that jealousy is something I've struggled with, and I need to find that confidence in myself. There's that way to go about it, where you're being very self-aware, and you're saying, hey, I am getting triggered over here. And when you text somebody or when somebody hugs you in a certain way, it really upsets me. And I know I kind of explode at those moments, but I also know that you're doing nothing wrong and that's something I need to work on. Versus the more common response in these sort of relationships is the guy makes the girl change so many things because he isn't able to see, or maybe he is, but he's not able to express that he has an insecurity. He has these issues that are his issues and they're not hers. And that usually gets projected on the girl, and she usually has to change what she does, who she talks to, where she goes, what she wears, all of these things that he now has a say in her life because of an issue he's projecting onto her. And so that is where it's way, way, way more common. And if you've ever been that girl or you've been that guy, because trust me, there are so many girls that are so beyond controlling in relationships. It absolutely drives me insane because it's not just men. Girls can be really toxic in relationships too. And if you've been in that boat where you're getting all this projection, you know it is the most frustrating thing and it crushes you. And no matter what you do, things genuinely usually don't improve because at the end of the day, you know that that is their issue, not yours. And no matter how much you fix it, they have to put in that work. So that is why we are having this conversation, because we need to get to the point where we can realize, oh, maybe I'm that jealous one, or maybe I'm the one that's projecting these things, or maybe like their response was totally normal and I'm just triggered because of my past things. And maybe it's actually not them. Maybe it is me. Identifying whether you're projecting your own issues onto someone else or if someone else is genuinely in the wrong can be so challenging. So I'm going to give you 5 ways I found really helpful to distinguish between the two. Self-reflect. Take a moment to self-reflect. Ask yourself why you feel the way you do about the situation or the other person's reaction. Are your emotions and reactions disproportionate to the solution? If your emotions seem out of proportion, it may be a sign of the projection. So let's pause for a second because I want to explore that a little bit more instead of just graze over it. Basically, in a situation, the way you feel, I want you to try to think about, are these emotions extreme? Like, do I feel these extreme things? Am I really angry? Am I really upset? Am I irritated? Am I really on thin ice right now with that whole situation? And do I feel an extreme emotion? And then ask yourself, was the situation really extreme? Because if the situation's super extreme, it's normal to have more of an extreme emotional response. But if the situation is pretty basic and general and you're having this extreme emotional response, then it might be a sign that you're being triggered. And I actually experienced this months ago. I was in this situation where I felt super blindsided by a friend. As soon as I found out that they were upset, I immediately reached out, was like, we need to talk. Can we please talk this out? Like, I have to get things off my chest. Like, I do not do well when I don't have the space to communicate when I know there's an issue. And so as soon as I found out, I immediately was like, you know what? I'm opening up this space. I really want to communicate these things. I really would appreciate if you could open up that door with me and we could talk about it. And days went by until they responded or gave me a time to be able to talk. It just kind of kept getting pushed to the side. And in that, I was losing my mind. Like, the 2 or 3 days were the longest 2 or 3 days of my entire life. And I was calling my parents almost every 10 minutes with a new emotion. I was just like, I was honestly flipping out. I was spiraling 1000%. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why do I feel these things? And then it clicked and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm being triggered right now because with my ex, when there would be an issue, I would get silent treatment. And then I would it was so many mind games and it was so confusing for me. And those were very hard times where I feel like there's some trauma there. And that whole situation with my friend was triggering that. And so in actuality, she just didn't have the time to talk. And she was just responding when she could give it her attention. And my reaction to that situation, which was a total normal situation, I was spiraling. And that was a me thing. That was not a her thing. That was 1000% a me thing. I was being triggered because my emotions were way more extreme for what the situation actually was. Number 2, consider past patterns. Think about whether you've had similar reactions or feelings in the past when faced with similar situations or people. If you tend to project your own insecurities or your own issues onto others, you may notice a pattern of overreaction or feeling triggered in specific circumstances. Kind of like I just touched on, that pretty much means identify where you felt these extreme emotions before and these reactions that you're having, and try to pinpoint, okay, where is this a common theme in my life? Does it happen with specific people? Does it happen with specific circumstances? Am I usually stressed when I'm feeling these ways? Or am I content with my life when I'm feeling these ways? Just kind of do an overarching of when have I felt these things before? An example, when I was young and growing up, a big pattern of mine was to not communicate or express what was going on in my mind, in my world, what I needed, what I was lacking, etc. I never communicated a single thing. And so it was a really common pattern for me to build up a lot of anger. And I now can look back and see I would get really angry when I didn't feel understood. And I didn't feel understood because I was not communicating. And now in my life, when I feel a frustration, a strong frustration, I will identify, do I feel this because I don't feel understood? And does that mean I'm not communicating? Or am I feeling this way because I did communicate and I'm still being misunderstood? And that's where I feel like there's 2 routes, where one, if I haven't communicated and I'm feeling this frustration and I'm feeling misunderstood, that's most likely a me thing because I haven't done my part in trying to communicate, okay, I know these things trigger me, I know on and on and on, I'm going to talk to that person about it. And that's a me thing. But then there's the other side of the coin where, okay, I'm able to look at my patterns, I'm able to identify when I felt these ways, and I'm going to communicate, I do communicate, and then I'm still left feeling this frustration, and I still am left feeling really misunderstood. And in those moments, that's where I can see, okay, this isn't my thing. If I'm still feeling this way, it most likely is the way they are viewing themselves and their past circumstances, their current ones, that are somehow prohibiting them to fully be able to see and understand where I'm coming from, and they're putting up this wall. And I can self-reflect and say, you know, I actually had no wall, and I was super honest, and I couldn't have gone about it in a different way where I still would have been proud of the way I handled it. So in that case, I do think this isn't my thing I need to worry about. And I can just accept, okay, you know what? They did that because of something that they're going through or they've been through, and I don't need to take that on, and I can move past it. Number 3, I love this one. Seek feedback. This is a real common theme, I feel like, in all of my episodes. I'm huge with your community and being open and seeking feedback because you can come up with a whole storyline inside of your head and it can be so true. And then the second you say that to somebody you trust, usually you'll probably realize, oh my gosh, that's like not even a thing. I built that up so much more in my head. And you're right, like that is probably not what's going on their end of things. So seek feedback. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, etc., somebody that you know is a safe space that is not a yes and person. Because if you are only seeking feedback from people who yes and you, or from people whose lives all around in their finances, their career, their success, their friends, their relationships, their goals, their priorities, if you do not want your life to mimic those areas in the way their life does, they are not the people to go seek out and get feedback from. Because if you are getting feedback from people that you don't even want your life to look like theirs in almost every way, then the feedback they're going to give you is going to lead you to the life that they currently have. And if that's not where you want to go, then you should not be seeking feedback there. So seek feedback from people that you genuinely respect. And I mean, you want your life to look like theirs in some aspect of their finances, career, relationships, goals, morals, things they value. All of those things are so important. Not just having a good friend that you feel like you can tell anything to. There's a huge difference. So seek feedback from those sort of people that are going to give you an objective perspective. I love the people in my life who are way more logical than emotional and who can really have my best interest always at the end of the day. But by having my best interest, that means they're going to be honest with me. And they're not going to just bring in their emotions. These sort of people in my life have really, really been such a solid rock and foundation for me to stand on when I feel very confused and conflicted in my head. And being in toxic friendships, toxic relationships, toxic family dynamics, any unhealthy sort of a relational aspect, I know that comes with a lot of gaslighting. And I've been gaslit so many times throughout my life. I'm sure I've gaslit others as well. I'm not saying that I've never done that. I'm sure I have. And whenever gaslighting is in your life, personally, it has really messed with my brain. And it's made me feel like I cannot trust my gut. I am so conflicted and I don't know what my reality is. Because what I think my reality is, when somebody gaslights you, essentially what they're doing is they're telling you your reality is wrong and the things that did happen actually didn't. And they say it in a way where you do believe them. And so I've been through seasons of my life where I'm constantly gaslit. And when I step out of those seasons, I have the hardest time trusting myself and being like, wait, did what happened actually happen in that way? Or was that all twisted in some weird way where all of a sudden every single thing is my fault when actually I entered this being the one hurt in the first place? And I just really question everything. And so when I've had those people, and I have those people, thank the Lord that He's blessed me with that, those people are such strong pillars for me to stand on and to go to and to be so honest and explain like both sides of the story, not just mine, but really defend the other person as well. And then ask them, okay, give me your feedback in this. Where do you think I could improve? Where do you think, like, was I right in feeling this way? Is this super out of line? Is what they were saying to me, is any of that true? And they've really been able to guide me in a direction that is clear and it's stable and it's strong and it's truthful. Number 4, evaluate evidence. assess the evidence and facts related to the situation objectively, basically with logic, not necessarily all emotions. Ask yourself if there are concrete reasons why the other person is in the wrong, or are your judgments based on assumptions, interpretations, or your own insecurities. In a relationship, let's say there's like that jealousy that we talked about in the beginning of this episode. If the girl is hanging out, forgot to respond, she's with her family, etc., and then the guy views that as, oh my gosh, you were probably cheating, she was doing this, she wasn't responding for hours, she was probably talking to some other guy, on and on and on. You create this whole reality for yourself. That's sort of an example of this, where evaluate the evidence, because is what you're feeling actually factual? Is that 1000% rooted in truth, that there is no way that that could not be true? Or is your evidence coming from assumptions, perceptions, your insecurity, and are you the one that is projecting what you think is true onto them when in reality that evidence doesn't even exist? Number 5, empathize and communicate. Approach the person being so open-minded and asking them why they feel the way they feel. What led them to think this thing about you? What led them to say those things or to react in the ways that they did if you found them hurtful? And whether it is your issue, maybe you are projecting onto them, or maybe they're projecting onto you, but being able to communicate and genuinely seek out why was this your reaction? Why did you say this? And you will most likely be so surprised, and you'll get all the answers you need from that. Because if that person is going to respond in the most defensive way, and still it is you that is the problem, then it most likely is them projecting. But if that person is responding in a way that is like, you know what, I said those things because I genuinely needed to set those boundaries, and I love you, I respect you, and this is exactly where I was coming from, and I hope that was not hurtful for you, and I would love to hear your side as well, and thank you for opening this up so we could talk about this and have a better understanding of one another. That sort of a response is probably going to show you, oh, okay, maybe that was my issue then, because they're so open to be selfless in this that maybe I did react in a way that was too extreme for the circumstance that was in front of me. By having an empathetic conversation, it can help you determine whether they genuinely made a mistake or if your perceptions were influenced by projection. I think it's so important to recognize that projection is such a common defense mechanism, and we all do it in ways, and just being aware of it and working on that is huge and something to be so proud of yourself for. And there's so many times where I'll notice I'm projecting something, not in the moment I notice, but even 2 minutes will go by or a day will go by, and I'll come back to that person and say, I'm so sorry. I definitely was just projecting, and I know that was not fair to get that upset with you over that. And I know, even though it did hurt me because for some reason that really did trigger me, I am sorry because I know that I projected that onto you. And taking those steps, it slowly helped my pride become way less fragile, and my ego is way less fragile, because building that strength over time to own up to your mistakes, it really has given me way more confidence and a way stronger ground to stand on than in the times where I didn't own up to those things or I did put all of it on everybody else. My confidence was entirely different. And when you're able to get to the point where you will accept, like, okay, that was my thing, and I'm going to take responsibility for that, and I'm going to apologize, friends, it is the biggest weight off of your shoulders. And I do this so much. I'm constantly trying to do this. Even recently, I had a situation with one of my good friends, and we had a rocky patch a few years ago, and a conversation got brought up where they were all like, oh yeah, I would never do that to you. I would never do that to you. And in my mind, I was thinking, I did that to him. I definitely did. And I'm like super embarrassed about that. And so the next day I came to him and I just went up and I was like, you know what? This conversation that happened the other day, I want to let you know I did that. I know I did that years ago, and I, moving forward, want to reassure you that will not happen again, and I'm truly sorry for that. And it was such a weight, because in those things, whether they've happened today, whether they've happened 10 years ago, when you come to that person and you approach them with honesty, it is the best feeling, not only for them, but for yourself. Because all of that, you're carrying that weight. And to be able to release that is so empowering, because you know your worth is not tied to that. You know you've moved forward. You know you're moving forward. If you are still in that scenario, you are working towards growth. And all of those mistakes and the projection does not identify you and who you are. It is only a pillar for you to move forward in and identify and grow from. Always give yourself grace. Things do not change and disappear overnight or in a week even. The more you start putting attention in yourself and the things that need growth in your life, the more you will find that garden is way bigger than you could have ever imagined. And it's a beautiful thing to realize, and it's beautiful to have so many areas in your life that you can grow in. To wrap up, how to identify the two outcomes, is it them or is it me? Remember, the key is to be self-aware, open to feedback, and willing to make positive change in your behavior when necessary. As always, I love you all. I cannot wait to talk to you next week. Do not forget to go follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube at The Finding Hope Podcast, and come engage with me over there, and be sure to rate the show and like this little episode. I love you guys. Have an amazing week. Bye.